This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Actually, don't have the agenda.
Well, the agenda has, first of all, is approval of the minutes for May 19th. Everybody here, oh, Jay, how are you?
Good.
Okay, you're allowed to vote on the minutes, but Greg is an abstention because he wasn't there. Actually, I checked this out. You could vote on the minutes. You just, most people don't if you're not there.
If we have enough votes, I won't. I'll just not do it.
So all in favor of approving the minutes for May 19th?
You want me to move it?
Yeah,
first?
please. Make a motion.
I motion we move up to approve the minutes of 5/19.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Jay Ryan. Oh,
Do you hear me?
Yeah. Jamie's gonna do the roll call.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear us? Dan,
Yes.
Greg,
Abstain.
Jay,
Aye.
Joe,
Here, yeah, I mean, yeah. Yes.
John,
Aye.
and Harry.
Aye.
Great. Motion passes 5 in favor.
Okay, there's no one from the public here. Paul's here representing, Paul, you can sit at the table if you want. You're representing the Park and Rec Department.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit. Do you have any communication?
I wanted to just append the meeting, talk about upcoming meeting dates. I'll be taking some time off.
That's gonna be the.
Okay.
I don't want to change the meeting date. Playing like that here.
And that's it.
City account balances, I just wanted you to be prepared for the next meeting, because we're gonna be talking about the bonding. To have up-to-date figures because we just passed the new budget. So I assume you can add all those dollars to the current accounts?
I can give an estimate, but it won't be accurate.
Well, it's
until-
only based on the budget. The budget.
Well, I
is
know
an
what we
estimate,
know
too.
what we will have for the budget, and I know what we didn't spend, but I won't know what revenue. I won't know an exact amount of the revenue that was taken in that we until it's certified by the
I understand that, but the budget we approved is what we're using as an estimate going forward.
Correct, but we won't have a good read on what the undesignated, how much is going to be in the undesignated. I'll have like a floor there that will be most likely at least,
At least that much, but it might be more.
it might be more, it might be a little bit less. It just depends on like,
Even though we just passed the budget, you can't add those numbers in. I never understand.
yeah, I don't either, but I know that every year I try it, I'm off and I get the auditor gives me a different number and it takes a
Maybe
month.
I'll-
It takes a
The only
month.
reason is we're going to be talking about bonding. I want to have a good idea of where our dollars are.
We'll have like an estimate that'll be pretty good, but it won't be exact.
So there's no project updates. I will update City Space when we get to it on the agenda, but otherwise,
So there were a bunch of projects that closed and funds are being returned.
but that should be in your folders, everybody.
Yep.
If you're interested in what's being returned, come.
And current balances. Do you want to go through those or?
No, I'm okay with that. Everybody can see the balances as we move forward. So let's move on to the Park and Rec departments and request. It's for a letter of support. And I guess Jeff and Paul, do you want to discuss this? It's for 3 phases of a pool upgrade, ADA. Phase 2 is the ADA playground. Phase 3, I don't have that page. Phase 3 is pathways connectivity. Now, I'm seeing years of funding, which is helpful. So Jeff and Paul, either one of you explain how this is going to work out to our budget, because it looks like the match for CPA is $500,000 for the pool, for instance, but It looks like that's over time. Who wants to start? Jeff? Beth? Paul?
Well, I'm happy to start. I will say that the funding source for the phase one for the pool upgrades, we're asking for 190,000. The other additional 307.5 thousand is going to, hopefully will be a match from the Land Water Conservation Fund, which is federal dollars. I do realize it says CPA/city next to that, and I questioned that also, but I did verify that those are federal dollars. So right now we're looking for a commitment of 190,000.
I'm not understanding, is the 307 not needed from the CPA or?
I do not believe that it's needed from the CPA. It's expected to be received from the Land Water Conservation Fund.
Is that true, Jeff? Did you hear what Paul just said?
Yep. No, I appreciate, Paul and John are the lead, and I just definitely wanted to be here to offer support. Paul, I don't have the materials in front of me, but that 300, the second phase for the Land and Water Conservation Fund, actually, it could be a $300,000 investment from the city, just because it matches the Land and Water Conservation Fund grant is up to 750,000. So we would be, in theory, in February applying for 750,000 from Land Water Conservation Fund, and there would be that corresponding city match. I think what I appreciate about what Paul said is what's before the CPA right now is the application for the park grant, because that's all we can do at this moment is we're applying for the park grant in July, and then in February, and it would actually be before February, we would be getting ready to apply for the 750,000. So we would be back to CPA with some other amount. We don't know that amount yet. So right now it's really, this letter of support is really valuable for parks to submit with the park grant. And then if we were lucky and we can secure the park grant, then we would go into, it'd probably be basically December and January, we would be back to CPA to talk about a match for the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And when you take those two grant sources together, we might be able to tackle sort of the bulk of the pool stuff. And so that's that kind of John and I think John and Paul and I have had collectively.
But the 307,000 is possible out of CPA.
Okay, yes, I stand corrected. We did just receive a lot of these funding numbers, so.
No, I'm not upset. I just want to know for sure what we're committing to. So this fiscal year, we could be committing to $500,000 to help the pool. That's what I'm reading it.
Yeah, and I think, Paul, if I could, I think that why it said like CPA/city is at some point, there might be a request for free cash or some other funding source from the cities to balance this out so that it's not all CPA. And one thing I think is really valuable right now is, and I give John the credit, is through this discussion. So this is the letter of support. It's a pretty easy initial step. I think we would be back in probably August, I think is what Jamie and I, August or September, for the actual request for the 190. And I think, yep. And I think through this process, the community at large will begin to realize that we have a huge investment that we need to be looking at into Nantucket Pool. And I don't think it's ever gotten this far in terms of like public awareness that we have this big project ahead of us. And so I think that's important to do now. So
I think it's absolutely important. And you need to know that I fully support all this work for the pool. It's an asset in the park. And I have no problem supporting it. I would like, this is just me personally, but I'd like to hear from the other members. I would like the city to help contribute. $500,000 is a big hit to our budget. We don't have a ton of money. And we just committed to a fairly large chunk of cash for affordable housing units in the 3 schools. That could be up to $1 million over a few years. So it sounds like this work wants to get done next summer because you're applying for grants that might come into play in the spring. Am I correct here? So this is definitely money for this year, right?
Yes.
You're shaking your head, Jeff. You too?
Yeah, my understand, yeah, like sometimes the park
Jeff, we
grant.
lost you. We lost you, Jeff. This
Can you
off,
hear me now?
what is off?
Did it just get kicked?
Yeah, I kicked it out.
We can
Oh, took us back
see
on.
you, we just can't hear you.
Now I unplugged the speaker, Jeff. Go ahead, try it again.
Maybe, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
It's a very good question, Dan, and I think we need to kind of polish this timeline up a little bit as we go, but the park grant could have so it doesn't get issued until we would know in like maybe November. And then it's design construction. So sometimes they go out for 2 years, and then the Land and Water Conservation Fund is 2 years. So we wouldn't have to cram it all in next summer, but we would be stacking these two grants together. And Dan, you do a good job of talking about this, but if we're getting 400,000 from a park grant and we get 750,000 from a Land and Water Conservation Fund, CPAs at the table, and then the city, like that's really leveraging the city dollars.
I would hope that the mayor would consider, and I'd ask you guys to consider when we get to the second part of this, the 307, maybe half of it from the city would be great. I mean, I think 500,000 is a lot in one chunk in one fiscal year. Also because there's two projects on the table, this big one, the pool, and the affordable housing one. And I don't know what else is going to come our way. I don't think City Space is going to tap into our funds this year, our extra funds. So that won't be a competing dollar thing we have to worry about, but that's a lot. So I think maybe when we get close to actually appropriating that 307,000, we sit down with the mayor and see how much she's willing to help with us. I think the Park and Rec Commission, John, you, Jeff, because I think it would be, I don't know, how do you guys feel? I'm doing all the talking here, but I don't feel comfortable. Go ahead, Jeff. Gary,
Where did they get these numbers from? That's what I want to know.
did you see these things?
No, I'd like to see, I'd like to see 2 or 3 bids on a pool or something like that, see what this actually costs. That is an awful lot of money for a swim pool.
These are estimates, right, Paul?
Yes, they're estimates. These are the results. I think there were 2 studies done that were funded by the CPA to determine the scope of work and the costs associated. Now, I do want to say that we just got these estimates, and the Parks Department does believe that there is room to save money on this project by completing some of the scope of work in-house. And so we fully expect that we'd be able to accomplish it for less money than what, we don't have a definite amount, but for less money than what's being quoted here. And some of these costs, they seem pretty high, but again, a lot of the work can be done in-house.
How big is that swimming pool anyway? How big is it?
How big is the pool, Paul? It's Olympic size, I think.
Yeah.
At least.
I mean, you can get an 18 by 36 pool put in the ground for like 25 grand, maybe 30 grand. So how can this thing possibly cost $500,000?
That's not even apples and oranges. Harry, this is a huge pool. And it's for the whole city. I don't think we can compare it to.
It's not just for the pool, but for also the facilities around the pool, fencing,
Hey,
It's also for, I think what I don't see here, and I guess they're doing it themselves, is the reconstruction of the filtration system and everything, Paul.
Mhm.
That's being done in-house or different?
I believe that was part of the quote was for the filtration system.
Guess I don't see it.
I
see-
saw
Did I
the
miss
parts
that?
in the list,
500,000. Unbelievable.
but
It's actually $1 million.
That's just unbelievable.
here we go. Yeah, it's the,
Here's something here. Yeah, this is the Nationwide Aquatic Consultant. Oh, I see here. If you look at the letter pool upgrades, the beta budget is 777,000 for the fencing and all that. And the NAC budget, which is the National Aquatic Consulting, that's this was in the packet. It includes the money for all of the, did you see that? That's for the filtration system and all the other work. So the total is $1,203,000 for the entire pool project. And is that everything? I mean, is there something else for the pool? Not the playground, I'm just talking the pool.
I believe this is everything for the pool.
We won't need to redo the liner or anything like that?
That is included as part of this. It's not necessarily a replacement of the liner, but they used a PVC membrane to resurface.
Okay, got it. Okay, so my hope is that the letter of support tonight that's on the table is 190,000. How's everybody feel about that? I don't know.
Is that a engineering firm or is this a actual construction consulting estimate? Who is Beta? Is that engineering or is that actual contractor? I guess is what I'm thinking.
All I know of them is that they were the consultants that were hired to evaluate and came forward with some of these.
Do you know who Beta is, Jeff?
Yeah, Beta is like a design firm. So they do conceptual designs, which is kind of where we're at. And then they do the construction level design, and then they do construction oversight. So they're kind of like, they do the horizontal construction projects. They do road projects and things like that, but they also do some parks. And, that's why we kind of chose them. And so if I just wanted to add, because I think this is a good discussion, and there's kind of there's the pool sort of maintenance that's a big number that was said, like 1.2 million. And the thing is that there's not that many programs that just fund maintenance, and we've talked about that before. But so the Land and Water Conservation Fund caps their grants at 750, and they do acknowledge maintenance and repair of existing facilities, but that will only get us so far. And so part of the discussion and strategy was that with the park grant, if we can incorporate certain things into the project, they're likely to fund that. And so the idea that we came up with was around the pool is all the concrete, and that needs to be taken out and replaced because they're going to do the infiltration, all the filtration underneath. So if the proposal is that we take out the concrete and we replace most of it with, a more sustainable sort of permeable concrete that's more environmentally friendly. And so then with the park grant, we would be accomplishing part of the repair project also by upgrading it with sustainability features. And then that's where the shade structures come in. Because if you look at some of the park grants that got funded, that's a main component, is providing shade amenity for people who are in these facilities. And so that's kind of the way we're trying to stack this, is the park grant can cover some things. And then the Land and Water Conservation Fund is really focused on like the filtration systems and the straight up maintenance that the park grant won't fund. And so that's part of why we're trying to team these together. We had originally added in the ADA playground and a path that would basically, so if you're near the pool, there's an accessible bathroom. And so part of the grand vision is to create an accessible pathway through the field that would connect to the ADA playground. But the numbers just came in so high. So we're kind of still talking about breaking it off into phase one, which is the pool and the concrete work. And then the Land and Water Conservation Fund would finish the pool, and then we would have to maybe come back next year to do some of the ADA components. But the numbers came in much larger. We don't know if it's the bidding environment right now, but to Harry's point, everything costs way more. And my one last plug, I'm kind of benefit to John is, if we didn't do this 10 years ago, we should really be doing it now, because if we wait another 10 years, we're either going to be eliminating the pool or we're going to be paying $4 million. So it's a good time to be really kind of raising this up and doing it. So
I don't have a problem. My issue will be, and if it comes to it, I think the pool is that important. We have to spend 307 on the CPA funds, but I think the city would be willing to help us there. Now, let me go back to the timeline. We get these two grants. You're thinking this summer, Paul, to get started, or next year?
I believe the timeline is 2 to 3 years from the receipt of the funds, or at least the approval of the funds to completion.
But So the money doesn't actually come out of our budget until a couple of years. How does that work? I guess it does, Jamie, right? It's reimbursement anyway.
Yeah, so typically with the park grants, it's the city has to be able to fund the entirety of it. And then it's reimbursement. So the CPA funds would,
Have to be set aside.
they'd be set aside and they'd be drawn on,
All
they'd be reimbursed.
So we couldn't use them for something else. Always.
If we came in under budget, then the remaining funds would be returned to CPA.
Proportionally.
Yeah, because they do like a
Because the
60,
park grant gets their money back too, don't they? If
Yeah.
it's-
they do like a
Sure.
68% reimbursement or something.
Anybody have?
Is it most like scenarios too that if they didn't get the 2 grants, then we would have to pay the money that we are, is that the same scenario? If these 2 grants Jeff's talking about did not come through,
Well, then that's up to the committee to decide what happens if both grants aren't received.
Well, if we get the grant, that's when we have to pay our match. We don't pay the match until the grant's actually awarded, correct? Let's just say that with Cherry Street.
Well,
You have to get the grant first.
But typically, they come in, they make the letter of support works for the application. And then when they make the award announcement, they give us like a month or 2 to finalize the appropriation, which usually is not enough time to actually get the appropriation from CPA to the mayor's desk. We have to have 2 hearings on it, that's CPA and then to the council and the rest of that. So they will probably come back before the grant's actually awarded to ask CPA to start that
Well, if we
appropriation.
do a letter of commitment, we don't need 2 meetings because we've already talked to them.
Right. So that, I mean, that's maybe.
Yeah, and if I could just add, I think Jamie's definitely correct. I think we would come back, Paul and John and I would come back in the September meeting and ask for the appropriation, and it would be contingent upon getting the grant. So we would allocate the money, it would go all the way to city council, but if we didn't get the park grant, then the money would not get used. The CPA money wouldn't get used unless we come back and have a conversation about what to do with that. But we would, in theory, hold that money until we apply in February, and that announcement might come by June, and then we would know if we have a whole package. So this is a big, there's a big question mark with all of this stuff, but we can't answer the question if we're not trying. So it's kind of like, that's the 2-step process.
Do we need a letter of support for the other grants, the federal money?
We would likely be back probably in December to have a conversation about that grant. And I think, Dan, I think that's your point. I think we would probably have to go to city council too at that point and talk about a city match for the larger grant.
It's not frozen to us.
Okay. So back, sometime before December, we should talk about whether she's willing to help us with some infrastructure funds or free cash or whatever. That would be useful.
I think that as far as the Parks Commission goes too, because we are drawing revenue into the city, there may be potential for us to look at our, the rates for people coming in and possibly being able to look at finding some extra capital that could be contributed as well. I don't know that for sure, speaking very preliminarily and theoretically.
Let me just say that if I was on your commission, I'd be opposed to that because we need our park is pretty much for our inner city people and the lower income people who can walk to it. And I would hate to see the rates go up.
I absolutely agree, but the truth is we need the pool one way or the other. It has to
Well,
be
let's hope that that's the last resort then.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Just to say, there's a will, there's a way.
we'll find a way. All right, I'm ready. Anybody, Jay, you have anything on the letter of
No.
support? We're only writing a letter of support for 190,000 now.
No concerns, because we're going to go back at this in September or December and, have another shot at it. So I'm fine with the letter of support.
John, Greg?
Yeah, I'm good with it.
So,
make a motion to write a letter of support and support of 190,000.
A second?
A motion and a second, further discussion. Hearing none, Jamie?
Dan,
Yes.
Greg,
Yes.
Jay,
Aye.
Joe,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Harry.
Abstaining.
So it passes 5-0-1. Okay. That is all on this right now.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. I
Thank
wanted to just briefly update you on City Space. Greg and I are going to meet because of the budget and grant stuff going on with the city. The mayor requested that we meet with the finance team, bond council in July. So Greg and I are meeting July 12th with the city to check out the structure of how this bond will work for the City Space project. We have the questions in mind, like when will it be issued? When will our first payment be? How it will be structured, whether it's a constant payment. And I'm really thankful that Greg's available because you deal with these kinds of bonds all the time. So, well, you don't deal with municipal bonds, and I know that they're different. But at least you have knowledge of the questions we should be asking. The one biggie that I wanted to put before the committee tonight is, given that we have these projects in front of us, I think we should bond 3.25 and not spend 225. Remember we talked about the extra City Space money they asked for, that it would cost 225,000 out of this year's funds, out of the undesignated fund, to add to the 3 million that we have $1 million in the bank with this year's budget just approved. We have 2 million where we're going to bond. My inclination is to bond 2.25 so that we don't take more money out of our cash. How do people feel about that? Because I think we need to go into the mayor's meeting with that kind of your feelings on it. I mean, obviously the cost is there, but I don't know.
I think
Cost of it.
there's a lot of uncertainty right now in debt markets because of rising interest rates. So it could be that you end up needing to have that cash available for less principal and more interest. So that's just my thinking on it.
And then
The price tag of this project is going up every minute with, I mean, the idea of rising, this huge rate hike that just went through is that that's going to suppress inflation. So maybe the price tag just went down if the cost of materials is not on this really massive trajectory, but the cost of borrowing just went up.
Does that affect bonds,
significantly.
even though they're municipal
It
bonds?
will,
as
it will,
opposed to
it will
regular?
trickle to the bond markets, absolutely.
That's what I was worried about. Might not be the best time to borrow.
I mean, I think it's worth looking at, and we'll have the conversation in July. And I think we'll even have more information between now and when our meeting is on July 12th about, but I mean, I wouldn't fault the mayor or anybody for saying, is this the right time?
Isn't the right time.
Well, just for asking the question, is
Right,
this the right
Oh,
time?
okay. Yeah.
Well, and the other thing is, if we,
It could be the right time because interest rates may be going higher. I mean, it could be the right time to do this because of where City Space is at and the moment is now. And
you say it trickles down, so one of the questions I have is, if we get authorization to bond, how soon do we have to issue the bond in order to get the interest rate to be done? Or do they have the ability to change the interest rate at the last minute?
So there's a lot of ways that this works, and one thing you can do is have a rate lock. So if you want to, I mean, this is at least what I'm familiar with, and I don't know if that translates into borrowing of 2 or 3 million versus 20 or 30 million. I think the smaller projects have less flexibility with the different things that you can do. But if you can get a rate lock, it's like a mortgage, rate lock or whatever. You lock in at a certain interest rate. Oftentimes, if you want to hold that for a certain amount of time, a bank would be willing to do that, but they'll either take a deposit from you in order to secure that, or they'll you pay a fee to, to assume some of the risk of what's going to happen to the rates in the interim period when it's not being, when the bank isn't actually making money on the borrowing until much later. So, because they're assuming some risk that if, interest rates continue to go up, they've just committed to this low rate. And so they're going to end up losing money in a higher interest rate environment if they've committed to something much lower.
Wow, okay. Well, we do what we can, but that's where we're
But
at.
I mean, you could, it's like ideally, depending on who we're working with, we can have somebody who is involved with the debt markets, go out and touch a number of different banks and they'll come back with their own, thoughts. Some might be able to do a drawdown structure. Some others might not be able to. Some won't be able to, will rate lock for a certain period of time. Somebody else maybe much longer period of time. So.
If we have the authorization to bond, we don't necessarily have to issue that bond or start trying to sell the bond right away. I guess I'm just looking at the council authorizes the bonding, but then when does the actual bonding have to happen?
That happens after the mayor then goes out, does all the work with the bond council, happens at some point in the future.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
Right, so it's not immediate.
Not immediate.
Right. So.
Because we authorized the bond for the Honeywell project. She hasn't touched that yet. So, question. What's it, Harry?
Or Harry, actually.
If you bonded now, say at the interest rates where they are right now, how much would you save if you waited and it goes to say 3 or 4% on a national interest rate? Well, how much would that affect the bond? Any idea?
If the federal funds rate went from 1.75, which
Yeah,
is where
4%.
1.5, which is where it's at now, up to 3 or 4,
Right,
I mean, we'd save a lot of money because we're looking at 200 basis points or something like that.
right. So how much would you got any idea on a $3,300,000 bond? How much would that be? Any idea?
Not off the top of my head.
Unfortunately, the timeline of the city council, earliest we could bond is September. If we get this bonding before council in August, it has to be approved finance committee and approved by council in September. That's the first, if it's the first meeting in September, right after that. If they want to bond immediately because the rates are good, then go for it.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd have to figure out.
I don't fully understand the municipal bonding process, because essentially what we're looking at is the amount of cash that we have. We're looking at our balances and so forth, saying, whatever $3 million project, we have $1 million and we're looking to bond 2 or 2.25 or whatever the number is. That's a mixture of interest and principal, I would think, right? I mean, that's not just principal that we're pulling interest from some other, pool. That's both interest and principal there. So if we're saying, 2.25, million is our number and interest rates go up, then suddenly either the cost of the project has to go down or, City Space is going to have to find other, sources for. Well,
it would depend, the cost of it, like I'm thinking 250,000 a year, it might skyrocket to 300,000. In which case we, or more, depending on the rates, right?
Yeah, but I mean, aren't we committing to a certain dollar amount? Like, I mean, are we committing to just the principal? And if interest rates skyrocket, we have already committed to the
What I
interest
look
on
at
that
is
principal.
the yearly payment.
Right.
If the yearly payment goes up above 250, that 250 was a benchmark based on what we've been saving.
Right.
This is just me.
But
But I've
that
been
you're-
always harping that as a benchmark. If it goes up a lot higher, then we have to talk about what we're bonding. We may have to bond less to get it to 250, and then they have to get more.
Or we increase the amount of time to pay it back.
We could do that. But that means over time, we're paying more. Which doesn't bother me. We did a school for 20 years, but I'd like to keep it to the interest isn't so high. And, they've been able, they just renegotiated the school bond, saved a bunch of money. So you can always renegotiate, right? So.
Sure. And I mean, one of the stipulations of what, the bonding process can be a prepayment option. So we can go longer term, and depending on, sort of what we have, we can potentially pay down earlier if the CPA or if the city's in a better financial position to do that, but we're not committed to doing that because we have a longer term to pay it out. So that kind of flexibility is hopefully
that's a
something
good
that we
point,
build into the,
If the cost is higher, we could decide on a longer term to get yearly budget costs. Goes back to my own personal, I pay by month and what can I afford by month? So what can we afford by year? 250,000 was the benchmark because we've been able to do that. Now our revenues have increased quite a bit. Stays there, we might be all right. So we have a lot of questions to ask. I know. Anyway.
So Greg, I think the first part of the question is, what is your feeling about adding the additional 0.25 onto the 3 million? Is that something like, I got the impression you were sort of saying you may want to keep it in case you need it for something else, or what point you were trying to make about?
I think that this project is getting more expensive, so I think bonding 2.25 probably makes sense if there's appetite to do that, just because I think that it will become needed. I mean, if we're looking at a shorter term, or we're looking at, the term that we had talked about, I think you're going to find that some of that cash or a greater percentage of that cash is going to go towards interest payments. So you may need a 2.25 just because the project costs piece of it is, the principal piece might need to be, it's going to get eaten up by interest payments.
So we've been looking at that $250,000 as giving City Space more money for it may not even go to that. It may just go for costs associated with the borrowing.
But that's all written into the loan, isn't it? I mean, we need 2.25 in principal. That's what we need for the project. The rest of it is interest.
Who's paying the interest if we're just paying the principal?
No, we're paying the interest too, but over time, like any mortgage, we borrow $300,000, the actual cost of the mortgage is $700,000. So the actual cost of this might be 3 million or 3.5 million over 10 or 15 years. But we need 2.25 cash out of the bond for them to do construction.
Right.
You see my point?
Exactly. So the 2.25 is what we're borrowing. And as you stated, the whatever we negotiate with the bond interest payments, that gets deducted before it even comes to CPA coffers. Or that pays out prior, like before it comes into our budget. So if it's a $250,000 a year yearly payment, it's not going to be 10 years to pay it back. It might be more.
It probably might need a longer.
But we don't have to appropriate out the interest piece of it. We just focus on what the principal's going to be or what the bonding amount's going to be.
We have to appropriate out the payment, whatever the payment.
But we do need to plan for the interest piece of this, right?
Right,
I mean,
but the CPA doesn't.
that's coming out of the CPA coffers, not some other pot.
Correct, but we don't.
But
We're not. Typically, the appropriation is like for the full project cost, but in this case, we're not. We're not going to council and asking for for the bonding, for the interest payments as well.
We're paying the interest over time.
Right, the interest is paid for by CPA, but it's not. It's the only thing that doesn't get appropriated. Every other expense from CPA has to go through CPA.
So this is going to be an issue, Dan, because if you're looking for a fixed payment year by year by year, that's going to be a mix of principal and interest.
So they get their interest first and then the principal at the end.
Then we just need the schedule because you're going to end up appropriating something less than, 250,000 a year or something like that, because your principal portion of that 250 is less. If you're just saying you only need to appropriate the principal amount, then we have to calculate what the principal amount will be.
We have to see the schedule. I mean, if the total cost of the bond is $4 million over 20 years or 10 years, then they're going to tell us you have to pay $300,000 a year or something. Or they're going to tell us you can pay 200 now and then pay 400 later on. That's the kind of questions we have to ask. What's the structure that's the best interest of the CPA? it's paying more later on also is calculated into the fact we're gonna be having more income later on.
But I know you want a fixed payment schedule, which I
Well, I
totally, I
think that's
totally
easier to
appreciate.
bond. I just think the 2.25 is the best way to go, but we have to see what it's gonna cost per year. That's the main thing I need to know. What's the cost per year? Do we only want to budget 200 this year and next year, and then it goes up to 225, 250, to 300? I mean, does it go up? Because that's better for the CPA, and that puts us in the place of wondering if our income will be maintained over that time. Now, we've put 250 in the bank for the last 5 years, 6 years now, this year. So that's an indication to me of a track record of less risk. You know what I mean? That makes sense to you, Jay?
Yes. So I'm okay, going for the 2.25. And you'll find out on July 12th better what that means.
Right. And the other thing I want to remind everybody that we did commit to 3.5 million for them. We already gave them 250. If $1 million in the bank, we're going to borrow 2.25, or we're going to borrow 2 and give them an extra 250. I don't want to take that 250, especially as Scott brought up, if we have to make the first payment this year. To make the first payment, that's coming out of the undesignated or someplace. Because if we issue the bond in September, because all the rates are good, and they say, well, your first payment is July 1 or January 1st. I don't know if we could put the payment off until the next budget year, but we may not be able to. And it may cost us a lot. They get their money some way or the other.
But if we bond less, then we pay less as well.
Oh, yeah, but, okay. Eric,
I think we should get this done as soon as possible, personally. Interest rates are gonna be going up 0.75% for the next 2 or 3 months. So I can't imagine what that's gonna cost, say, the money you could save. You got it done as soon as you can.
well, as I said, the legislative process is what we're up against. I need to get this to council. That's why I have to talk to you. If it's approved at our July 21st meeting, CPA is going to vote on the bonding. To send it to city council for authorization. At that meeting, it goes to city council for the first meeting in August. Then they send it to finance. And I'm going to push for a vote first meeting in September. Exactly for Harry's reason. The sooner we get this done, the better. But we have to talk to bond council. They may say, that's not going to matter. I don't know anything about this. You know more, but I don't know.
Yeah, but I don't know the municipal piece. I don't know how does the interest piece get appropriated eventually? I mean, it does, at some point, goes through some sort of process to be.
Well, we pay,
appropriated, right?
Right, and so when CPA votes to bond, and the bond goes to council, and CPA sets the terms of that bond, then and the bond's approved, and the mayor and the finance director look at what's been stipulated and what's flexible, and then
I can look at
they
the,
work within that, in those confines to figure out how much the interests are gonna be in. To set the schedule, if we didn't already tell them that it's gonna be 250,000 a year. It's too, they'll work with the constraints of CPA, and then
part of that,
the whatever is decided is sort of binding back to the CPA with regards to the interest. If that makes sense.
our bond right now, as we pay it, it's shown on the balance sheets as, when you look at our debt and interest section, we just voted on it last night, that's why it's in my head. We have a principal payment and we have an interest payment. We pay both per year for all of our bonds. So it's separated out that way.
The approval was all together.
Approval was all together, but it's separated out how it's paid, and they structure it, how much interest they're paying and how much. But you put 2 of them together, they come out of the same appropriation.
Right.
The bond payment might be 250, but 125 is principal and the rest is 125.
That was my understanding. I think that's all together.
Yeah. Okay, so we're okay. We're gonna go for 225 to try to protect our cash. Everybody's okay with that?
Can we also?
And we're not committing to it. We're just saying that's the way Greg and I should approach it. To save the cash for the other projects. Right, Jay?
Yep, good.
Okay, that's all I have to talk about. Do you have anything else on the agenda, Amy?
Just the upcoming meetings. But we can talk
I
about
know
that
you're
on Friday.
going away.
We can talk about that after. the meeting.
I just want to talk to you about that.
Yes, we can talk about it after. the meeting.
Okay, next meeting is July 21st. I don't want to change it. If it is changed, I'll get to you. But that's a big meeting because it is bonding. I hope to vote on it that evening. Okay, everybody? Oh, you're welcome to come too, but if you're interested. Thank you all.
All right, good night.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion to adjourn, Jamie?
Dan,
Yes.
Greg,
Yes.
Jay,
Bye.
Joe,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Harry.
Aye.
Hold on, Jeff wants to. All right, did everybody say that? Goodbye, Jeff. That's what that was a goodbye. Everybody, did you vote, everybody? I'm stopping the recording. Good night, everybody.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.